right, gang, our topic for today is marginal analysis. This is going to take us 2 days, so we'll do part 1 and then follow it up by making it a little bit more advanced in part 2. So what you're going to see today is kind of the easiest version of marginal analysis. It's super easy. You're not going to have any trouble with this content right here. But once we make it a little bit more advanced, there'll be a little bit more math involved. So just want to give you a heads up. Don't let yourself get lulled into this kind of false sense of security, okay? So when we talk about marginal analysis, we're talking about a way of making choices in a world of scarcity. So it's a way of making choices in a world of scarcity. So think of it as a decision rule, in a sense. So when we have scarcity, we have to make choices. We have trade-offs. So this is a way of making choices, a decision rule for making choices under scarcity. Remember, guys, that the goal here is that we want to use resources efficiently. So we have to decide, is some kind of undertaking good or bad, with the idea of we want to use resources efficiently. Now remember, guys, if we didn't have scarcity, would we care? Would this be so important if we didn't have scarcity? No. So understand this is all tied to this idea of scarcity because we have limited resources, which means we can produce limited amounts of stuff. So we have to make good decisions. Again, when we talk about our resources, we could be talking about time. We could be talking about money. It doesn't always have to be a financial resource. So keep that in mind as we're going through. So the idea of marginal analysis, in a nutshell, is it's a decision-making rule that's going to allow us to allocate resources where they are most valued. So it's a decision rule that's going to allow us to allocate resources where they're most valued. Now remember, guys, this is what we mean by efficiency. Allocating resources to where they're most valued. So you might want to underline that. Allocate resources to where they're most valued. You might want to underline that and note to yourself that that's what we mean by efficiency. If I ask you the definition of efficiency, that's what we're talking about, okay? All right, so marginal analysis, a decision rule that will allow us to allocate resources to where they're most highly valued. In other words, it's a decision rule for efficiency. And by doing this, what this is going to prevent us from doing is allocating resources to places where they're not valued, right? That makes sense. So in doing this, if we use this rule, then it's going to prevent us from allocating resources where they're not highly valued. All right, you guys get the idea. So promote efficiency. So let's start by talking about what we mean by thinking marginally. And guys, you're not going to need to get every word of this down, okay? So just kind of take away the things that are going to help you when you look at this later. When we talk about marginal analysis, we think marginally. So let's introduce this idea of thinking marginally. And you guys already think marginally. You just didn't know what it was called. So I'm going to illustrate to you the idea of thinking marginally. So example A. Let's say that you can buy a pizza for $10. And you can buy 2 pizzas for $15. So in your brain, what calculation are you doing?
You save $5 if you buy the 2.
Yeah, if you buy 2 pizzas, you're kind of saving $5. In other words, what's the additional cost of the second pizza? $5, right? So the first pizza is going to cost me $10 and the second pizza is going to cost me only $5. So in your mind, you calculate that the cost of the second pizza is $5, right? That's thinking marginally. And you guys do this kind of thing all the time, right? As you go to Cookout and they say, oh, you know, you can get a soft drink with your tray, but for an extra $1, you can get a shake. Oh, the marginal cost of getting the shake on top of this platter is $1, right? You think about this kind of stuff all the time. All right. Let's look at example B. Same kind of thing. You can get an internet package for $50. But there's an internet and phone package for $70. So in your mind, you're thinking to yourself, the phone is costing me what? $20, right? The phone package is costing me $20. So again, we're thinking marginally, all right? So you guys already do this. This is super easy. So this is what I mean when I think about things in a marginal sense. This is thinking marginally, thinking at the margin. Okay. So in both examples, as this says right here at the bottom, I have to now compare the costs and the benefits, right? I know that the first pizza is $10 and the second pizza is going to cost me $5, but I have to think about how much do I value pizza. And I know an internet package is $50 and I can add on for $20 the phone package, but I have to decide what's my value for an internet package, what's my value for a phone package. So I'm not done. We haven't really illustrated a decision rule. Right now we're just thinking marginally. So let's do another example that might be a little bit more sophisticated, and this is the idea of shoplifting. So guys, does Walmart want to eliminate shoplifting? Do they do things to actively eliminate shoplifting? Yeah. But we have to acknowledge that if it's free to do this, then yeah, they're going to go after all shoplifting, right? But guys, is it free for them to eliminate shoplifting?
No.
Is it zero cost for them to eliminate shoplifting? No. So we need to appreciate that when Walmart addresses shoplifting, it costs them both time and money, right? Time and money. It's not free. It's not a free lunch, right? So they have to make some decisions. Is it possible that Walmart tolerates a little shoplifting? Is it possible that they choose to tolerate a little bit of shoplifting? Absolutely. So it might be rational, and this is a key point, it might be rational for Walmart to accept some level of shoplifting, right? Because do you agree that at some point it's going to get very expensive to eliminate the additional shoplifting? At some point, and in some areas of the store, it might be very difficult. And my understanding is that people find all kinds of different ways to shoplift. And so people get very creative. So you got to take some efforts to prevent it, but there's some point where it just starts getting very, very expensive. All right? So let's suppose that Walmart wants to hire security guards. And this is going to be their strategy. We're going to look at just security guards for eliminating shoplifting. Now, I realize that their strategy involves a lot more than that. But for right now, for today, we're just going to be hiring security guards. And so we're going to start at the relevant margin, which is we've got no security guards. So it's important to understand that our starting point is the margin where we have no security guards. So right here, we're in charge of deciding how many security guards that they should hire. And at this point right here, we have none. So for each guard that Walmart hires, they have to think about the additional benefits. So guys, how would I quantify the additional benefits of hiring a security guard? So I hire my first security guard, and the benefits are what?
Less shoplifting.
How much less shoplifting we have, right? So I hire the first guard, and they're going to help us prevent some amount of shoplifting, right? And so that guard is going to result in less shoplifting. That's the value of the guard, right? But then we also have to think about the additional costs. Where do the costs come from? I got to pay a salary. Exactly. I've got to pay a salary. So do you agree when we hire a guard, we have hopefully benefits in the form of reduced shoplifting, but we also have costs because we're going to have to pay him a salary. So our decision rule is simply an organized way to compare costs and benefits, but we want to do it incrementally, marginally, okay? So we need to look at additional benefits from hiring security guards, and we need to look at additional costs. So we basically have this scale. The additional benefits, as we've said, make sure you've gotten in your notes, is reduced shoplifting. So I've got to be able to quantify how much shoplifting did this guard's present reduce? How much of a decrease do we see? And do you agree, guys, that that has a dollar value? Can I put a dollar value on that?
Yeah.
Sure. We reduced theft by $1,200, right? That's a dollar value. And then I need to compare it to the additional costs. And what did we say the additional costs are going to be? Yeah, his salary. So what's it going to cost me to hire a guard? And of course, in the real world, when you hire that person and they're full-time, they get benefits and you have to pay Social Security taxes. And so there's more to it. We're going to keep it very simple. But you see where we're going here. We need to be comparing the additional benefits to the additional cost of hiring a guard to decide how many guards we should hire. All right? So, we call the additional benefits marginal benefits. These additional benefits that we've just talked about, we call them marginal benefits. We're hiring one additional guard. What are the marginal benefits? Okay, so you need to understand the term marginal benefits. So at the margin, what are the additional benefits? Marginal benefits. But we need to get some other language down. Another term for marginal benefit is marginal willingness to pay. Marginal willingness to pay. So marginal benefits, what are the additional benefits we get when we hire a guard? In this case, reduce shoplifting. And that's also called our marginal willingness to pay. Why do you think we call it marginal willingness to pay? So we hire a guard and he reduces shoplifting by $1,200. Why would we also call that my marginal willingness to pay?
Well, people that are paying him are willing to pay because it's benefiting them.
Yeah. How much are we willing to pay? If he saves us $1,200 in shoplifting, we're willing to pay, in theory, up to what? $1,200, right? So that's a rational decision. You reduce shoplifting by $1,200, and I pay you $1,200. Well, it's my break-even point, right? So I'm willing to pay you up to $1,200. So the marginal benefit and the marginal willingness to pay are the same thing. So we're asking, how much would Walmart be willing to pay for an additional guard? That would be the marginal benefit or marginal willingness to pay. Everybody with me? That makes sense? All right. So on the other side are the costs. So we need to ask, as we said, what will it cost us to hire a guard? So what do you think we call that? If the other was marginal benefit,
Marginal cost.
this is marginal cost, right? So we call this marginal cost. The additional cost of a guide, I keep saying guide, but I mean guard, sorry. I'm still in like Costa Rica hiring tour guide mode. Marginal cost. So when we hire a guard, we incur a marginal cost. Okay? So Walmart then has to weigh, very simply, the marginal benefits and the marginal cost. It's that simple. So Walmart needs to weigh the marginal benefits and the marginal cost. So we're getting close to kind of establishing this decision rule. I have to compare marginal benefits to marginal cost. All right? So make sure you have that in your notes. So you can imagine a conversation amongst managers, and one guy might be saying, hey, we need to hire more security guards to cut down on theft. We could save a lot of money. And so he's talking about, do you agree, marginal benefits. We should hire guides. We're going to save on theft. Theft's going to go way down, and it's going to save us money. So he's talking about the marginal benefits of hiring security guards. And the other manager's saying, okay, well, what will this cost us? And we agree that he's talking about marginal cost, all right? So marginal benefits and marginal cost. So this leads us to the decision rule that we were talking about that we said we're going to need to use. And this is called the rule of optimization. The rule of optimization. So when I say rule of optimization, you'll need to know what I'm talking about. And the rule of optimization is very simple. It says if marginal benefits are greater than marginal cost, it's rational to undertake an activity. If marginal benefits are greater than marginal cost, it's rational to undertake an activity. And that makes sense, right? So this would be an example where we save $1,200 in shoplifting, but the guard only cost us $400. Everyone agree? Marginal benefits outweigh marginal costs, and you'd be saying, hey, let's hire that guard. That makes sense. Now, what if we have this situation? If marginal benefits equal marginal cost, So what if marginal benefits equal marginal cost? Do you agree that it's still rational to undertake this activity? It's still rational? As opposed to irrational? It's your break-even point, but guys, if I pay somebody $1,200 to save me $1,200 in theft, is that irrational? Is it irrational to do that?
No.
No. So if it's not irrational, it's got to be rational. But I do agree with you that y'all are kind of shaking your head. You're not really sure because there's nothing in it. There's no benefit, right, to the firm. No extra benefit. But it's not irrational. You with me?
Question.
Yeah.
Well, the product that would have been stolen, they're making profit of what's not stolen. So is it technically a benefit?
Well, let's ignore any loss of. I understand what you're saying. So you're trying to now get into the profit. Is it a profit or is it what we paid? Is it a revenue? Let's just say that the value of what was lost was $1,200 to the firm. Whether you want to think about that, calculate the profit above the cost that you already paid. Let's just say that item, $1,200 loss. That's really all that matters to us because I'm trying to decrease that $1,200 loss, right? But I see where you're going. Let's not make it any more complex. I'm going to keep it very simple, all right? So do we agree, guys, that when we're at this point of equality, we're going to have a break-even point, but it's still rational, yes? Because it's not irrational, okay? And then finally, if marginal benefit is less than marginal cost, do you agree here, if the marginal benefits of doing something is less than marginal cost of doing something, it is not rational? Everyone agree with that statement? It is not rational. So guys, are you going to pay $600 for a guard if theft only goes down by $400? Are you paying $600 for the guard if he only reduces theft by $400? No, that's not going to make any sense. So guys, this is our rule of optimality. And normally we write it only in 2 steps. We'll say, so make a note that normally you're going to see me write this, if marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost, then it's rational. Okay, so normally we combine the first 2. If marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost, then it's rational. So generally we're going to just write 2 statements. It's rational if this, it's irrational if that. All right? So let's do a simple example using marginal benefits and marginal costs. And so now you can look at your handout and you've got some extra columns compared to what I have here, but that's okay. We're going to be adding those. So what we're going to do is look marginally. So make a note, guys, when we look marginally, we're looking incrementally. We're looking incrementally, okay? So I want to look marginally or incrementally. And you might still want to get some things into your notes while we discuss this. I've reminded you that marginal benefits is what's saved from the reduction in shoplifting. All right? So how much do we save in shoplifting? And I'm reminding you that marginal cost is the money we have to pay to hire the security guard. So we understand those, and those are both dollar figures, so it's easy. It makes it easy to compare, right? So remember the rule. If marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost, then it's rational. So normally you're going to see me write the rule of optimization like that, all right? If marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost, then it's rational, all right? Now, before we move on, let me just warn you guys that this is going to be super easy, and I understand, because this is the easiest type of problem that I can give you. It's the easiest type of problem. I will not give you problems that look like this on your test. We're just doing the easiest form to understand the rule of optimality and do things related to consumer surplus. Part 2 of marginal analysis, we'll step it up a notch, and that's going to be more like what problems are going to look like. All right? So let's say that the first security guard has a marginal benefit of 700. So in words, how would I explain that? When I say that the first security guard has a marginal benefit of 700, how would I put that in words?
They save us $700
They're saving us $700 in theft. Good. They're saving us $700 in theft. They reduced shoplifting by $700. But the marginal cost is $100. So what does that tell me? What does that tell me, guys? I have to spend $100 to hire him. Good. All right. So our rule of optimality is very simple. It simply asks us to make a decision about whether we should hire him. Do we agree? It is rational to hire this person. All right. Now, so it's rational to hire this person, right? So do we hire? Yes. But now the next thing we need to think about is that Walmart receives what we call consumer surplus. All right? Walmart receives consumer surplus. So we need to get this definition into our notes. Consumer surplus is the difference between what Walmart is willing to pay and what they have to pay. So the difference between what Walmart is willing to pay and what they have to pay. So do we all agree that there is positive consumer surplus? There's a difference between what Walmart's willing to pay and what they're being asked to pay. So get that definition in your notes, and then we'll calculate this. So guys, what's Walmart's willingness to pay for this first guard? They will pay up to $700, right? At $700, it's a break-even point. What do they have to pay? $100. So, do we have consumer surplus? How much? $600. Everyone agree that we have $600 in consumer surplus, right? So, let's make sure everyone understood that. Walmart's willing to pay $700 for the first guard, because that's what they would save from shoplifting. But they only have to pay $100. They can hire a guard at $100. So they have this kind of psychic savings of $600. And that's consumer surplus. Money you were willing to spend, but you didn't have to spend, right? So consumer surplus, $600 for this first guard. Everybody with me? Does that make sense? Question?
Yeah. In the case of the shoplifting and hiring new guard, I assume that they hired him, and in the first month, that's when they.
I'm assuming. That's a very simplistic example. So let's just say we've hired our first guard, or I've been able to do some research, and this is what my research suggests. We should save $700. So either way you want to think about it. Either I've hired him, and this is what happened, and I go, oh, this was a good idea. It was rational. We'll keep him. Or I bring in some kind of expert, and he says, look, here's what my studies are saying. All right, so everyone agree now. We've got a marginal benefit of $700, a marginal cost of $100. It is rational to hire this person, so we would hire this person, and it gives us $600 of consumer surplus. Everybody with me? Easy. All right. But now we need to look at additional security guards. This is what we mean by thinking marginally, thinking incrementally, right? Because if you got that kind of consumer surplus from the first guard, you're probably thinking, wait, what if I hired 2 guards, right? So we would look at a second guard. So let's assume that that we hired a consultant. Let's go with that scenario. And our consultant says, this is what we think the marginal benefits and the marginal costs associated with hiring additional guards will be. So get these numbers down, and then we'll continue in this example. So guys, what do you notice about the marginal benefits here? They're starting to fall, right? So we'll talk about that momentarily. But you see that as we hire more guards, right, that marginal benefit is smaller and smaller. But marginal cost is what? In this example, it's constant because it's just a price that I can hire guards at, a wage, okay? All right, so let's continue with this example. Let's apply the rule of optimality, and then we're going to look at consumer surplus. So what about the second guard, guys? Would we hire him? Sure, we would hire him. And the third guard, do we agree? Hire him too? What about the fourth guard?
Yeah.
Fourth guard, we'd hire him. What about the fifth guard? And what about the sixth guard? What about the seventh guard? No. Everyone agree we would stop after 6 security guards. Why am I not hiring the seventh guard? The cost, the marginal cost, outweighs the marginal benefit. So it would make you worse off. Everyone agree? Why would I pay $100 to save $75 in theft? That makes me $25 worse off, right? So here, if I were to ask you on a problem like this, what's the optimal number of guards to hire? You would tell me 6. It's rational for us to hire 6 guards. The optimal number of guards to hire is 6. All right? And you need to make sure you can articulate why we would not hire the 7th guard. So when we're doing this, guys, we're basically looking at Walmart as a consumer. They are consuming security guards. And we can look at this idea of consumer surplus, what we just talked about, the idea of consumer surplus for each additional guards. So remember, we want to calculate consumer surplus. We understand what consumer surplus is. It's the difference between willingness to pay and what you're asked to pay, right? So you should already have that definition in your notes. The difference between willingness to pay and what you're asked to pay. All right? So again, just another simple example. You go to the store and you're willing to pay $30 for a pair of Levi's. You get to the store, Levi's are on sale for $24. So do you have consumer surplus?
Yeah,
$6 of consumer surplus, right? The difference between what I was willing to pay, the $30, and what I ended up having to pay or being asked to pay, $24. So $6 consumer surplus, okay? All right, so let's calculate consumer surplus. We've already done it for the first guard, right? We're willing to pay $700. We're asked to pay $100. And that's where that $600 consumer surplus came from. Everyone agree? All right, so go ahead and calculate consumer surplus for the rest of the security guards. All right, so does everyone have, for the second guard, Walmart would get consumer surplus of 525. For the third guard, 400. For the fourth guard, 200. What's happening to consumer surplus here? It's going down. Why is consumer surplus going down?
Because MB is going down.
Because marginal benefits are shrinking, right? Does it make sense that as we get more and more guards, their effectiveness, the additional effectiveness might shrink, right? The impact of the first guard's really big. The second guard's still pretty good, but it's diminishing, right? That makes sense. So, fifth security guard, 120. Sixth security guard, $25. So now we're getting to a pretty small consumer surplus. What do we see about the seventh guard? It's actually negative, right? Make sure you had a negative sign there. So something that is rational, so let's think about this for a second. Something that is rational has what kind of consumer surplus? Positive, or it could have zero, right? Everyone remember that? If marginal benefit equals marginal cost, it's rational. So if consumer surplus is zero, is that rational? Sure, it's rational to pay $1,200 to save $1,200 in theft. It's my break-even point. But what do we know when consumer surplus is negative? It's got to be irrational, right? It's not rational. So hiring the 7th guard is not rational because it generates negative consumer surplus. It makes us worse off by $25. You with me? All right. I might also ask you to give me total consumer surplus. Total consumer surplus. And in this case, it's 1870. Is that right? Make sure I haven't made an error. Somebody added that up really quick. Make sure that's 1870. Does that look right? Good. So guys, am I adding up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? Or just 1 through 6? 1 through 6. Would I add in the 7th? Am I hiring the 7th guard? No, not hiring the 7th guard. So would I add the 7th guard to total consumer surplus? No, right? So when I ask you for total consumer surplus, you need to look at the number of guards you're actually hiring. And in this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I add that up, I should get total consumer surplus of 1870. Somebody checked behind me and said I've got that right. Okay. Everybody with me? Super easy example, right? So in this case, guys, total consumer surplus is 1870. We just said for guards 1 through 6. But do you agree? If I were to hire the 7th guard, total consumer surplus would fall to 1845, right? Everyone agree with that? Because it's negative for the 7th guard. So I don't hire the 7th guard because it would reduce my consumer surplus, which would be irrational. We would never make a decision where we voluntarily reduced our own consumer surplus. That would make no sense. Okay? So then basically what this tells us, the rule of optimality will maximize our consumer surplus. The rule of optimality is really just an organized way to make sure that we maximize our consumer surplus. If we're not maximizing our consumer surplus, then we are not making the optimal decisions. All right. Any questions? So you understand the rule of optimality at this point, right? You understand how to calculate consumer surplus. You understand what we mean when we say thinking incrementally or thinking at the margin. Okay? Good. All right. So, very quickly, we're going to recap and then we're going to look at this graphically. So, we've already said that people think at the margin. Make sure you understand what we mean by margin. A margin is an incremental change. So, guys, what was our increment for this problem? For the Walmart shoplifting example, 1 security guard, right? 1 security guard. So what was our first margin? Our first margin was 0 to 1, right? Our second margin was what? 1 to 2, then 2 to 3. Do you understand what we're doing? We're looking at marginal changes, incremental changes. So we started with 0 security guards. That was our status quo. 0 to 1. That was our first incremental change, our first margin, okay? So guys, when we think at the margin, when we think using this kind of marginal analysis, we have to use the rule of optimality, which means we need to know marginal benefits and marginal costs. And I need to be able to compare them. Now, in part 2, do you think I'm going to give you marginal benefit and marginal cost? No, you're going to have to calculate that yourself. So that's how it's going to get harder, and it's not going to be super hard. But I've given you marginal benefit and marginal cost in this example. So remember our rule of optimality. If marginal benefit is greater than or equal to marginal cost, it's rational to undertake. Otherwise, it's irrational. That's how I'm usually going to write it, okay? Of course, if marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, then right there, not with the equal sign, but just if marginal benefit is strictly greater than marginal cost, do you agree we have to have consumer surplus? There has to be some positive level of consumer surplus. Everyone agree with that? Mathematically, there's got to be some positive level. Don't forget though, guys, and this is where people make mistakes. If marginal benefit exactly equals marginal cost, it's still rational. But what do we know about consumer surplus?
Yeah.
It's zero, right? Everyone understand? We don't have any consumer surplus. At that break-even point, it's still rational, but our consumer surplus is zero. You with me? All right. So now let's look at this graphically. So take a second and sketch out the plot of the marginal benefits. And do you agree, we doesn't have to be to scale necessarily, but we started at 700, it fell to 625, to 500, and on. And so it's a downward sloping function. I've drawn it as linear. It's probably not linear. It's definitely not linear, but don't worry about it. I just care that it's downward sloping. So we have a downward sloping marginal benefit curve. Everyone agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
And we agreed that that probably makes sense, right? Because the first security guard is going to have probably the biggest bang for the buck. Am I right? That first security guard is going to be the most impactful. By the time I'm hiring a sixth security guard, his ability to eliminate theft is going to be certainly much harder than when we only had one or when we didn't have any. So you guys get the idea. So our marginal benefit curve is going to look something like that, except for probably I shouldn't have drawn it linear. But that's okay. And we see that marginal benefits falling. So we have a specific name for this, guys. When we talk about marginal benefits falling, this is what we call the law of diminishing marginal benefit. So it's not a very clever name. So we see here the law of diminishing marginal benefit. As we add more and more guards, the benefits of each additional guard are going to fall, right? So the marginal benefits of additional security guards is falling, illustrating the law of diminishing marginal benefit. Now, guys, I contend that you're already familiar with the law of diminishing marginal benefit. For example, you have a pizza in front of you and you're really hungry. And that first piece tastes really great, right? Then the second piece tastes good. By the time you get to the fourth or fifth piece, you might still be enjoying it, but is it the same level of enjoyment as the first piece you ate when you were hungry? No. Right? So we experience diminishing marginal benefit all the time. All right? So the law of diminishing marginal benefit simply says, and this is important wording, at some point, marginal benefit will start to fall. At some point, marginal benefit will start to fall. At some point, marginal benefit will start to fall. So underline that phrase, at some point, because I'm using that language very specifically, at some point. Why am I saying at some point?
Meaning it's always like gonna happen.
Okay, it's always going to happen, but why do I say at some point rather than just say marginal benefits fall? Why do I?
It doesn't always fall right away.
It doesn't always fall right away. It doesn't always fall right away. You don't have to have diminishing marginal benefits right away, all right? So here's an example that could also occur. And in this case, so get this in your notes, in this case, what do we see? We see marginal benefit increasing, and then eventually marginal benefit starts to fall. So what might be an example of this? Well, what if you play intramural soccer and it's a hot day and you get off the field and you need a glass of water and you just grab that glass of water or that glass of Gatorade and you just chug it. You don't even taste it. You don't enjoy it. You just like, oh my God, I'm gonna pass out. Is it possible that the second glass of Gatorade would be more enjoyable than the first? The first you just chug because you're so thirsty and you're feeling dehydrated and you think you're gonna pass out. And then the second one, you can sip a little bit more and you might enjoy that better. Or have you ever been so hungry that that first slice of pizza just keeps you from feeling like you're going to throw up, and then the second piece of pizza you can enjoy a little bit more because you're not feeling sick anymore because you were so hungry? All right, so in theory, marginal benefit can have this kind of pattern, right? So make a note in your notes about an example that might illustrate that kind of marginal benefit pattern, that they can increase and then decrease. So get some example in your notes so you understand what kind of scenario might lead to a marginal benefit pattern like this. I'll give you a second. So I've given you the example, you're super hungry, you barely can taste the first slice of pizza, but you enjoy the second one more, marginal benefit's going up, and then at some point it's going to start to fall, right? So you get that example. What about this range right here? What's going on here? So draw your marginal benefit curve so that it crosses the axis like I have. Make it go all the way down below the axis. You can either redraw it or just add it to your previous graph. What's going on here, guys? What's true about your marginal benefit here? In this, it's gone negative. So what does negative marginal benefit mean? It's not helping me anymore, but something can be zero, have a zero marginal benefit and not helping me anymore. So can we say something more specific?
So it costs outweigh benefits?
Well, right now these are just marginal benefits. I don't know anything about costs, so I don't want to say that the costs outweigh the benefits because I don't know that, right? I'd have to have both curves to know that. So what can I say? Okay, a negative effect happening. Somebody give me an example. What might be an example of negative marginal benefit?
Drinking too much water.
Drinking too much water, and then what happens?
Is the average in there or something like that?
What?
Yeah, your body is sick.
If you drink too much water? All right, so if you drink too much water, you can make yourself sick?
Instead of it benefiting you, it's hurting you?
Instead of benefiting me, it's actually hurting me. Anyone ever gone to the, all-you-can-eat pizza buffet and ate one too many pieces of pizza, and now you just feel sick? Or had one too many beers and kind of pushed you over the edge, and now you're in your bathroom throwing up? I know, none of you know what I'm talking about. I have 2 frat boys at UVA. Occasionally they call me in the middle of the night after imbibing. I don't know if they're at this negative marginal benefit section. Okay, so negative marginal benefit. It's not a benefit anymore. It's actually causing me pain and grief and suffering, right? So if you want me to eat that slice of pizza, you would have to do what? If you want me to eat that slice of pizza, because it's not going to make me better off, it's going to make me worse off, you'd have to what? You'd have to pay me, right? You'd have to pay me. You'd have to pay me. So marginal benefit can become negative, as we see right here. So put an example down, maybe eating one too many slices of pizza, drinking one too many beers, having one too many tequila shots. So you see this in the movie. So even if you don't have an example from your own life, I know you've seen this on TV. And so now you feel sick. So that's negative marginal benefit. So guys, is it rational to consume something that gives you negative marginal benefit? Is it rational? No. Unless you what? Unless I'm being paid. So if you're going to pay me for my pain and suffering, it might be rational. But voluntarily, would I voluntarily consume a slice of pizza in that negative marginal benefit region? No, I would not. It's irrational. So what if somebody paid you to eat it? Could it be rational if somebody paid me? So I'm going to get negative $3 marginal benefit from eating this slice of pizza. And Abraham says, I'll give you $5 to eat it. Okay, I'll eat it, right? So you understand where we're going with this. All right. So Law of diminishing returns is another way of saying that. So get that in your notes. Law of diminishing marginal benefit. Here I've accidentally switched it to law of diminishing returns, same thing. So law of diminishing marginal benefit, law of diminishing returns. You might see me say it either way, so get a note. Law of diminishing marginal benefit, law of diminishing returns. But both of them say that at some point, marginal benefit will fall, right? At some point, marginal benefit will fall. So at some point, marginal benefit will fall. But as we just illustrated, guys, and you've got all this in your notes, you don't need to write it down again, but they don't have to fall right away, right? They don't have to fall right away. We could see, theoretically, we could see marginal benefit increase and then decrease, right? And marginal benefit can become negative, and it would be irrational to consume in that region, right? So it's irrational to consume when marginal benefit is negative. All right. Now, the graph we just had only had marginal benefit. Now let's add our marginal cost curve. All right, so we've got our diminishing marginal benefit, but we know we can hire guards, so redraw your marginal benefit curve, and let's remember that we can hire guards at $100. So does everyone agree that marginal cost is $100 and it's constant, right? So how would I draw that on my graph? Everyone draw it in the air for me. How would I draw that on the graph? How would I draw a constant marginal cost of $100? Good. So do you agree? And mine's not necessarily to scale, but it's going to be constant. And so do you agree then? I can use the rule of optimization, and the rule of optimization says that I'm going to consume all units for which marginal benefit or margin are greater than marginal cost, right? Which brings me up to Q star. So Q star is the rational point to consume up to. But let's make sure we label Q star. Some people label it here. Is this a Q right here? Do I want to see on our graphs Q up here? No, Q is measured on the horizontal axis. So make sure, if I ask you to show me the optimal level of output, you are labeling it on the axes. This is not a Q, right? This is a Cartesian coordinate that maps together a dollar value and a quantity. All right, so Q star is the optimal number of guards. And also notice our shortcut rule. Graphically, we simply found the point, right? We'll consume all of these units up to this point, but a shortcut rule would be just find where marginal benefit equals marginal cost, right? Everyone agree? That at that point of intersection, marginal benefit equals marginal cost. So it's rational to consume all of those units on the left, am I right? It's rational to consume all of those units because marginal benefit's greater than marginal cost. But do you agree that it's irrational to go past Q star, right? It's irrational to go past Q star. So I would not consume there. All right? So we can figure out consumer surplus. Now, really quickly, let me leave you with this. Our example gave us a constant marginal cost. Do marginal costs have to be constant? No. Sometimes we can have marginal cost increasing. So if we were talking about environmental cleanup, we might see an increasing marginal cost. We'll look at some of those later. So very quickly, let's conclude. We said that people make decisions at the margin. We use marginal analysis. The rule of optimality is going to lead to maximum benefits, and we cannot do any better than this. So guys, the rule of optimality, you're going to see a lot in this class in various forms because it's going to generate efficiency. So we need to understand this rule. So I think you guys understand this. So make sure you understand consumer surplus and diminishing returns. All right. So again, let me just leave you with part one was the easiest type of problem. We're going to step it up for part two. So next class period, you need to come with your calculators ready to step this up just a little bit, okay? All right, guys, have a lovely day.